Hello, I'm Jenny Fern and welcome to my library. I am a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who is really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. So today I have a video that is based entirely on an idea from Katie Marie, which is recommending books that I loved based on their 1-star reviews. I thought that was such a fun idea. So I am taking it in its entirety and I will be trying to recommend you books based on the material within a 1-star or 2-star review. So I have 10 books today. I will be reading first the section of the review, then revealing what the book is and discussing why I think this highlights strengths within the book. Something that I like so much about this idea is there are plenty of times that I've read something that I know other people would love, but it just wasn't for me. And so the reasons that a book isn't for me can be the reasons why somebody else loves a book. I've listened to people discuss a book that they thought was kind of like, and from that discussion, I'm like, I think that would be a really cool book for me. First, I incorrectly interpreted the strangeness of this book to be something mystical and otherworldly, like a Floridian Alice in Wonderland. But then, also like Ava and the rest of her family, I was cruelly bitch-slapped by the real world. By the end, Russell makes it clear that there is no magic or wonder to be found here. Only horribleness, deceit, and plain evil. And that is a review for Landia by Karen Russell. This is one of my favorite books. I read it quite some years ago now, I think maybe 2017 or 2018, but it really turned me on to Karen Russell as an author, and now she is one of my favorite authors. I thought this was just such an excellent book. There is such darkness in this book, and it is in such a fun seeming place, adventureful seeming place. There's a lot of quirky elements to the story, but this book has a heavy sprinkling of reality that kind of drenches the characters in this book in the real world, despite having this imaginative quality, which I just think is really excellent. Next, I have to read the first line in the book, so you may be able to figure it out right away. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. That is easily one of the saddest, most pathetic introductions to a book. As I started this book, I wondered, if the introduction is like this, how will the rest of the book be? I think that's a great question. So if you felt a certain type of way about the introduction of the book, if it did not grab you, you might feel the same as this reviewer here. But if it did catch you in some sort of way, you might like what you find. I do feel like The Catcher in the Rye is such a conflicting book. People can understand what's going on and get what the book is trying to do, and they can still not like it. I totally understand that. But I think this is one of those things where the items that people really love are also the items that other people really hate. I love that. I love that this book can do that to people. Next review. It was easy reading for sure, but it seemed almost like it was a joke. It reminded me of my junior high school days when the teacher asked us to write stories and read them to the class. You wrote hollow, silly things that you thought sounded clever and exciting. That is in a review for Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. I love this book. This is the book that really turned me on to Kurt Vonnegut. And I have to say, I feel like this review is also really, really applicable to Galapagos, also by Kurt Vonnegut. And it's an aspect of Kurt Vonnegut's writing that I absolutely love. There's this aspect of ridiculous plot lines and just the silliness and absurdity of the different things that are introduced. But underlying, there is something more. And that's what I just love about it. It is such a fun experience to read a book that is written for adults that includes silly, ridiculous plot lines. Rose is a young girl who learns that she can taste the emotions of people in the food they cook. In this way, Rose finds out her mother is sad and empty, to the point she can't eat the food her mother prepares. Her father is withdrawn and distant, and her brother is a genius and just plain weird. And that's it. Neither Rose nor any member of this family ever finds any kind of resolution. And that is for the particular sadness of Lemon Cake. When I read this book, I thought it was so good. I thought this was so good. And then when I went to put my review on Goodreads, I was like, the reviews are so low for this book. And I saw that many people were disappointed by this book. There's kind of this magical realism aspect, but it doesn't have that lightness or that sparkle of magical realism that I think really disappointed a lot of people. But what it does have is this really profound portrayal of what it's like to live around people who are suffering from mental health issues. And I think there might be a bit of a line of people who have really had that experience, and those who haven't, where people will just not get the point of why we did this book, why we had this book, if they don't have that aspect to relate to. That's my idea and my impression of it, but I could be wrong. It could just be some people just don't plain like the book, even if they had that experience. But I think it is so rooted in reality that there is some aspect of resolution, but not in the way that people crave, you know? It starts out as a fascinating discussion of the development and rise of our species, Homo sapiens. But starting in the second section on the agricultural revolution, Harari shifts gears and drops any pretense of scholarly work. From that point on, it's all personal bias all the time. This guy absolutely hates human beings and society. It seems that he is completely stuck in the idea that the world would have been better off had humanity simply stayed put in the hunter-gatherer stage. It seems all the countless billions of humans who lived since then are deluded and don't get it, and that only he understands. So if you've read this book, you probably know that he is talking about Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. This book was so foundational for me. This is a book that I deem like my favorite book. It was so important to me when I read it. And I think it's because it does go outside of our current construct of civilization and society and look at things with a different perspective. Was the agricultural revolution a mistake? I would also like to point out in this review this last line of, it seems that he is completely stuck in the idea that the world would have been better off had humanity simply stayed put in the hunter-gatherer stage. And I just want to ask, like, where is he wrong? Because is the world only human beings, or is the world a lot of other living creatures? Just clearly this person could not get over their own hang-ups. They could not conceive of a different idea of humanity. if you're interested by what he states here, I think you'll really find this book interesting. Just keep an open mind, I guess. An idealistic and unrealistic view of architecture and land use. It would be nice if we could live in perfect little towns like Woodstock, Vermont, but that's not going to happen. So this is a review for The Geography of Nowhere by James Howard Kunstler. I love that this reviewer acknowledges that it would be nice. It would be nice to live in a different world. And I think this book is really just laying out what the heck we've done with our towns and cities, with the places that we live in the United States. And again, gets you to try to think about things in a slightly different perspective and how things can be better. I do love that this reviewer notes that things could be better, but has no interest in pursuing that. The beginning is so sparse on the world details that we're left to make our own assumptions for how everything works. Then have to change those assumptions once the author decides to throw us some clues. The final chapter tries to give closure, but the big questions are still left unanswered. The big conflict still unresolved. That is a review for The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. This is for the entire series, and they gave the entire series a 2-star. I absolutely love this series. I think it is so excellent. And I love the sense of the sparse world, and I love the sense that you get to piece together these clues and reassemble what you think is going on, and that you get an ending that has some element of resolution, and yet there's still so much to think about. I love this series, and I think that this review perfectly captures the things that I do love about it. This review is so perfect because, again, this just so highlights what I found so wonderful about this book. This person found to be its detriment, right? So this is also a 2-star review. What a thoroughly depressing book. Instead of something fun and light, this book was all about death and what happens when we get older and lose our memories, and what happens to our memories when we die. It was a very meta book masquerading as a children's book. I mean, it was a very meta book masquerading as a children's book. That is something that I'd be interested in reading. And that is for The Great Good Thing by Roderick Townley. I felt a very similar way when I started reading this. I was like, well, this might be something light and fun. Like, it is a children's book. It's something I picked up at the Scholastic Book Fair when I was a child. And it starts very, like, fun. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I have to say, I loved where this book went. It was in such a interesting direction to speak about memory and death and cycles of death and cycles of memory. I thought it was so much more than a light and fun children's book, and that's one of the reasons why I loved it. Okay, so this was a bit too much. Murata took it to a level that verged on parody. The absolute ridiculousness that was paired with these incredibly intense, upsetting narratives made me feel very strange, and definitely at times felt like she was making fun of these situations. That is for Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. So here's the thing. I can understand where this reviewer is coming from. She's speaking specifically about kind of the idea that there are some like traumatic things that happen to our main character. There are some very dark things going on in this book that are triggering. And so I don't agree that Sayaka Murata is making fun of those situations, but I do think she is amplifying the internal feelings and thoughts of somebody who has gone through those aspects of life. She is not representing somebody who is going to process this normally and be a functioning person in society. She is not taking that route. I feel like it was kind of therapeutic the way that she handled this subject, in a similar way that Stephen King in Carrie takes these really tragic stories of these teen girls from his childhood and turns it into a revenge plot that doesn't really end well for anybody. I feel like this book does a very similar thing. It takes things to an extreme level where, again, we have these horrible things happen and we get to this level where it doesn't end well for anybody, but in a way that's kind of revengeful. So that's just what I really liked about Earthlings. And I think the ridiculousness, the intenseness, the strangeness, the too muchness of it all is really what makes it all work, in my opinion. Wells creates a horrific situation and tells it in the most boring way imaginable. It isn't exciting, which it obviously wants to be. It isn't particularly scary. So that is for The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. And that is something that I just love about this book. It does have a plot that is very it has excitement levels to it. It has action levels to it. And there are horrifying aspects to what's going on in this book. And instead of focusing on those aspects, we focus on the concepts of pain and humanity and lack of humanity. And we have these really interesting conversations about like the morality of it all. It's not about how scary it is or the action that takes place. It's about the idea. And that is what I love so much about it. And I do love the idea as well that it isn't exciting, which it obviously wants to be. I love that, taking it back from being that really exciting story that it wants to be and putting it into a more contemplative state. This is something that I love about this book. So now that we have looked at all of these books, I just want to highlight that I did try to grab from different genres. I also would like to reflect a little bit about how these books reflect my taste, because these are some of my favorite books, and the things that other people don't like that I like about them. A lot of it is kind of the dreariness or the sadness, the deep, dark things that exist in the world. Seeing those things in a slightly more magical, beautiful, grotesque, and humorous way. There is some aspect to humor and ridiculousness in these books that I just love. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if any of these books are on your 5-star or 1-star, and if you are inclined to read any of these books because of the 1-star review that I provided. I would really appreciate hearing what you have found interesting about these reviews. I also want to give additional thanks to Katie Marie for the wonderful idea and such a fun exercise for me. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it with a friend who you also think would enjoy the video. And I will talk to you again soon.